by Cumberland tomorrow. Today's transportation forum will be focused on technology and transportation. We're so excited that you've decided to join us this morning for our discussion. I'm sure it's going to be really fascinating. My name is Bob Murphy. I am Vice President and Regional Practice Leader with KCI Technologies, as well as a founding board member of Cumberland Region Tomorrow. I am a traffic engineer and transportation planner, and I have over 40 years experience in a wide range of multimodal planning and design projects. So I'm extremely excited about our forum today on technology and transportation. We have a really awesome panel consisting of Preston Elliott with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, Aaron Hafkinshield from Vanderbilt University, Jorge Riveros with Metro Nashville Public Works, and Adam Mosier with the City of Franklin. I'll give a more formal introduction of each panelist when we start our discussion. Cumberland Region Tomorrow educates and advocates for quality growth planning across the 10-county Middle Tennessee region with a mission of finding and building consensus around strategies that will enhance the quality of life for the region's communities. Transportation is one of CRT's key focus areas. And in keeping with our goal of advocating for best practices, CRT is pleased to offer this transportation forum, which is the fourth of a series of forums that have followed CRT's annual Power of 10 Summit, which was held back in August. The other three forum topics have previously included parks and open space, development, density, and design, and finally, Main Street businesses. How can good planning principles help them survive the pandemic? If you have interest in these topics, I encourage you to view the YouTube videos of these forums, which are available on the CRT website. You can access that at cumberlandregiontomorrow.com. I would also encourage you to visit CRT's website and sign up for our e-blasts so that you can keep up with the latest information in the region regarding quality growth and transportation. For today's forum, we will hear from several of Tennessee's top transportation experts on how their organizations are using technology to better plan, design, and operate transportation systems. Also, we will discuss future trends in transportation technologies, as well as innovative applications that are being used in other communities. Our diverse panel will give us perspectives from the national and state levels, as well as local governmental and institutional perspectives. I want to take this time to recognize and thank CRT's sponsors. Those sponsors are shown here. We appreciate their assistance in CRT's efforts. We have an excellent, diverse group of sponsors for the Power of 10, as well as the subsequent forums. So we're very appreciative of their support for our efforts. I especially want to thank the sponsor of this forum, Stantec. And at this time, I would like to introduce Mark Pearson, Senior Principal in Stantec's Nashville office, to say a few words. Mark?
Thanks, Bob. And again, my name is Mark Pearson. I'm not only a senior principal with Stantec, but I'm also a very proud board member of CRT. And we're just so excited to help sponsor this forum today because this topic is very near and dear to us. Is we're involved in many of these same initiatives and ideas that are going to be presented today. I I laugh. I always struggle with these sponsor introductions in terms of how to tell you about Stantec in a very quick way. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to show you a very quick video. It was made by Stantec. It's all Stantec employees, but it's going to give you everything you need to know about Stantec in a much more entertaining and exciting way than I can than reading a list of services. So enjoy this quick video about Stantec.
I'm part of it.
You're part of it.
We're all part of it.
It's where I work.
It's the team I work with.
My colleagues
and my clients.
It's how I connect.
And the people I connect with.
It's how we got started.
And where we're going.
It's where I learn, get inspired,
And explore.
It's where I live.
Where I relax.
And where I play.
It's me.
It's you.
It's us.
Community.
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 Community is who we are, and it's why we design. It's thousands of employees, the clients we serve, and everyone who benefits from the work we do. Wherever community, creativity, and client relationships meet, that's where our work begins. From mining materials that matter, to helping industry prosper, and harnessing and transmitting energy. From designing places that nurture and restore, to keeping the world moving, and providing safe, clean water for everyone.
We are dedicated to the communities we serve.
Because they're our communities too.
That's why, whatever I do,
Wherever the project.
I promise.
I promise.
We promise. We promise to design with community in mind.
I hope that was a little bit more entertaining than, again, me talking about that. So anyways, thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Bob at this point.
Thank you, Mark. And once again, thanks so much to Stantec for your support. Now, before we begin, let's take a look at your dashboard and its features so that you can get the most out of this discussion. On the right side of your screen, you will find the chat and Q&A tabs. Near the end of the broadcast, we will have our panelists answer questions submitted during the show. If you have question, or if you have interest in a question that's already entered, click the upvote button. That will make it rise in priority. You can view the broadcast in full screen mode by choosing the chat and Q&A by clicking in the down arrow in the upper right-hand corner of each feature. You can reopen them if you elect to use them later in the broadcast by clicking the chat icon, and it will open all features. Now that you understand how the platform works, let's begin. Our first panelist is Preston Elliott. Preston, in April of this year, was named Deputy Commissioner and the Chief of Environment and Planning Bureau with the Tennessee Department of Transportation. Having worked with TDOT early in his career, Preston has over 25 years of community and transportation planning experience within Tennessee and the Southeast. Prior to rejoining TDOT, Preston spent 16 years in the private sector, working with both a national firm as well as an international firm, providing professional planning services to communities large and small. And I had the pleasure of working with him for about 12 years of that time. In addition to his DOT and private consulting experience, Preston has also worked with 3 metropolitan planning organizations, and as a community volunteer, served 12 years on a local transit authority board. Preston is a certified planner, and he has worked in every mode of transportation, from walking, biking, transit, and vehicular planning to truck, freight, rail, and shared mobility. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Social Science and Urban Planning from Florida State and a Master of Science in Public Administration from Tennessee State University. Preston, go ahead.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the introduction. And thank you to everyone joining us today. I think this is a really timely topic, and I look forward to sharing a little bit of what the Department of Transportation is doing statewide. So I hope that my slides are showing. Is it in presentation mode? Awesome. I appreciate that. it's always the challenges of virtual engagement. So the department, I say I spoke too soon, maybe. Give me 1 second to make sure here. Doesn't appear that it's advancing, so. My apologies. Let's see if I. Alrighty, I think I got it now. Sorry about that. So a lot of you are probably very familiar with the department, and maybe some are or not, but we are responsible for the interstate system, as well as about 14,000 miles of state highway systems across the state. We have about 4,100 employees statewide, and we were responsible for everything from planning to construction and maintaining. And our mission statement is pretty straightforward, and it's to provide a safe and reliable transportation system that supports economic growth and quality of life. And innovation and technology is really at the heart of that. I was thinking this morning as I was preparing for this presentation, looking back at Tennessee historically, and we were one of the first states in the country to have a fog detection system along I-75. I mean, you know, this is something that was able to sense weather conditions and provide motorist information. And I just think about how far we have advanced in those applications that are out there to today, things that we're doing that we're calling test beds, and even virtual simulations and aspects of intelligent applications that are computer learning. So we have really come a long ways in the industry, and I hope that what I share today gives you a glimpse of what the department is venturing into. And it makes me very happy and very proud to be in Tennessee, seeing that we really are at the cusps of some of the most advanced technologies. And so I'll share with you one particular project that we've been working on for some time, and it'll probably be about another 4 years before you see full application of all of the technologies. And that's the I-24 corridor, which we're calling the I-24 Smart Corridor. And it's a combination of the interstate system of I-24 as well as the parallel facility of Murfreesboro Road. This is one of the most congested corridors in Middle Tennessee. And when you look at the companion of both the arterial and the interstate system itself. And not only is it a congested corridor, but it is also a corridor that is experiencing a tremendous amount of growth within Rutherford County and the southern southeast portion of Davidson County. The project has 4 primary goals. It's increase travel time reliability, increase mobility for all modes, reduce the concentration of crashes, and develop agency coordination. And so it really is a project that is, I think, a test bed for technology and advancement of various applications. And I'll share a little bit more of that here in a second on the corridor. But we have aspects of dynamic lane assignment, sensors, and a variety of other applications, including ramp metering, and then the integration of transit along the corridor. So So I was mentioning one of the corridors that I think that really highlights the innovation of the department, working collaboratively with many stakeholders, is the I-24 corridor. And this particular corridor, as I mentioned, is what we're calling a smart corridor. It has a whole host of technology within it, everything from cameras and radar to communication systems to dynamic message boards. And ultimately, what we're trying to get towards is where we're managing not a lane, but all lanes within a corridor. And then also thinking about that as it relates to the companion arterial roadways and those roadways that connect over between Murfreesboro Road and I-24. And as I was mentioning a little earlier, is that this is a project that's going to take about 4 years to unfold, and we're actually developing it and designing it in a way that it becomes a test bed for technology, so that we can better understand connected and autonomous vehicles, as well as how people are actually traveling within the corridor. And so over time, we'll really be working towards intelligent artificial intelligence, where computer learning can be utilized to help maximize the efficiency of the corridor. And just kind of transitioning into that, this on the artificial intelligence component of it is where we're actually learning as operational aspects are occurring, where people may elect to utilize different routes based on travel time. And then the connected component of that aspect of it will be a feedback loop for where we can maximize the efficiency of the roadway. So really, as you begin to think about technology and how vehicles begin to communicate among one another, and how vehicles begin communicating with our infrastructure, that there's so much that can be learned through that process, that we can ultimately optimize our roadways from a transportation standpoint as it relates to operations, as it relates to safety. And then also, when you think about the integrated component of that on transit, the ability to provide advanced information to individuals that are making their trip, so that they know and can figure out if there's an actual travel time savings that could be achieved from a mode shift and or a corridor shift or a time shift. So it really is kind of on the cusps of advanced learning as it relates to transportation. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and get into some of the foundational components of technology that the department is also working on. And so we've recently won a grant to develop what we're calling the I-40 Smart Fiber Corridor. It's essentially providing 143 miles of fiber optic communication between Memphis and Nashville. And ultimately, our goal with this corridor is that we can develop more of the technologies that I was just mentioning to you on the I-24 corridor, but a massive corridor between two major cities, Memphis and Nashville, on the operational side, so that we have the ability to deploy either messages along the route, also sensors and so forth that can help improve safety and mobility. And as you begin to think about vehicles, not only automobiles, but you begin to think about the truck fleet. And as we look at industry going towards autonomous type vehicles, this is really creating the foundational base that allows us to have that network in place, so that we can really begin to plan for the future in terms of the types of vehicles that we expect to be on our roads. Also, a really good aspect of this is that it also allows us to create a framework, a foundation for broadband internet that could be a spine that can feed to our more rural communities, providing broadband access as well. So it really has multiple benefits. We're excited to begin on that project as well. So there is, in addition to these projects, we are also working on research efforts. I mentioned to you about I-24 being a test bed. We're actually, if you've noticed, if you've driven along the corridor somewhere around the Bell Road, Old Hickory Boulevard component, you'll see these really tall posts that are out there. And we're beginning to put into place a test bed that'll allow us to do further research on connected and autonomous vehicles. And we are partnering with Vanderbilt and other universities across the country on looking at aspects of what is called a circle research, where you can test in real live environment multiple connected and autonomous vehicles. I think they're working towards a goal of 100 vehicles that can be tested along the corridor to figure out optimization of what things will look like in the future as it relates to connected and autonomous vehicles. Here's a few other examples of things that we're working on in terms of wrong way detection, work zone alert system pilots, and also the truck mounted attenuator pilot. I don't know if you've ever had been maybe stuck behind, let's say, our restriping of a roadway and or any types of road work, there's a vehicle there that kind of is intended to be that cushion if there was some sort of safety aspect in terms of not running into roadway workers. And so there's a pilot initiative going on to look at basically a driverless component there that would create an additional safety component within the work zone activities. I'm going to shift from technology that you think most often about and to a companion component to it. I think most of you have probably heard that GM has announced a $2 billion expansion to produce electric vehicles in Tennessee. And that's very exciting because I think that what makes me happy to know is that we actually are putting in foundational aspects as well, partnering with the Tennessee Environment and Conservation, TVA, and others, looking at creating an electric charging systems across our state. We actually are working on the I-40 corridor, which is from Arkansas to North Carolina, so that there can be fast charging opportunities across I-40. Ultimately, we would like that to be across all of our interstates within the state, and giving individuals the ability to have these charging stations and not worry about that they can get from one station to the next. So it's really important. I like to say, as I think about technology in vehicles, especially on autonomous and connected, is that these vehicles will be electric. It's unlikely that we would see vehicles be gas driven and having autonomous and connected. So I think that it really goes hand in hand. I often say that it's not likely that you would get a Beyond Burger with bacon. So I think that it's not likely that you're going to see gas vehicles with connected and autonomous components to it. Again, this is another thing that we're working on in terms of technologies across the state. The last thing I'd like to end with is something that relates more on the planning side and planning and operations. And this is the aspect of big data. And it's either, you can look at it from your smartphone, Google, Apple. There are also the GPS units and components of your vehicle that are sharing information constantly. And these data sets help to inform decisions about either operational improvements, capacity improvements, modal decisions about whether you may walk or bike or take transit. And so this information, as it becomes more readily available, are helping inform the decisions that we're making, not only today, but also in the future as we look about future transportation needs. And I apologize again about the little technology glitch with the presentation, but Bob, I guess I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Preston. That's exciting. TDOT is obviously at the forefront of some very significant technology efforts, going from the planning side through the design as well as maintenance. So that's really exciting. Our next panelist is Erin Hafkinshield. And Erin is the Executive Director for Mobility and Transportation at Vanderbilt University. She served as the Director of the Mayor's Office of Transportation and Sustainability for Nashville Mayors David Briley and Megan Barry from 2016 to 2018. Her previous experience includes philanthropic and consulting work for California Environmental Associates, the Bay Area Council, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Eric was a 2008 U.S. Fulbright Scholar to China, where she studied urban planning and transportation. She is a PhD candidate in civil and environmental engineering at Vanderbilt University. She holds a master's in public policy and urban planning from Harvard University and a BA in political economy of industrialized societies from UC Berkeley, where she also happened to be the captain of the varsity women's lacrosse team. Erin?
Thanks, Bob, and thank you very much for having us today to talk about this really important topic. I am going to talk about MoveU, which is Vanderbilt's strategic transportation and mobility plan. Can everyone see my screen okay? Tech check? Okay, great. and we'll make sure that it's advancing. Okay, fantastic. So before I jump into MoveU, I just want to sort of set the stage. And Preston, of course, talked about a lot of these issues and a lot of these overall technologies, so I'll be able to run through them really quickly. But if you have ever worked in transportation planning or transportation engineering, you know that everybody is a driver, and so everybody has very strong opinions about how transportation planning and transportation decisions should be made. I guess we sometimes call them armchair transportation planners, but I guess in this context, they're backseat transportation planners. So I think when we talk about these issues, it's always important to sort of set the stage about what's really happening. And while most people driving on roads today don't really want to hear this, creating a well-functioning transportation system is extremely difficult, and there very rarely is an easy answer to any solution. In fact, when you are making decisions about transportation, there isn't really sort of a true or false. There's just sort of a little bit better or a little bit worse, and we're trying to sort of manage that to the best of our ability to make sure that we are always moving in the direction of better rather than worse. The other thing that I think is really important for us to talk about is that we really have a two-tiered transportation system here in the United States, where we have invested heavily in car-oriented infrastructure over the last 50 to 70 years, and we have not invested in walking, biking, or transit infrastructure. So for a lot of us who drive, we have access to the system on the left, on the top left. This is the brand new 440 that just was completed, and anyone who has driven on it knows the improvement that infrastructure has made. For a lot of people who can't or don't drive, which across the country is really 30% of our population, they have access to the system on the right. A bus stop that is cuts through a bike lane and doesn't have a crosswalk close to it, and just a system that does not have sort of great infrastructure to support it. And also, as a user, you don't necessarily feel comfortable or safe using that system. And this, of course, has led to this pedestrian safety crisis that we are currently in. We've already had 28 pedestrian deaths here in Nashville, Tennessee this year. Our annual average earlier in the decade was closer to 15. So we have been breaking records over the last couple of years, and our trend is definitely going in the opposite direction. Another important thing to keep in mind is that community engagement and stakeholder input is critical to any transportation planning process, but it's a very challenging process. It's not always easy to get input from a very diverse group of residents. And again, you run into a situation where people providing stakeholder input aren't necessarily coming to the table with the same amount of information. And finally, one of the big issues that I want to talk about, and Preston ended with this, big data and transportation. Critical to this conversation that we're having today is that we often make transportation decisions based off of incomplete data. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I think technology is going to play a really important role in helping us address that particular issue. Preston talked quite a bit about this, so I won't say too much about this, but clearly we are in the middle of a transportation revolution. Electrification, automation, and sharing is drastically changing sort of how the transportation system happens. But the one thing I will say about this is that these technologies are happening, but they aren't necessarily happening to us. As transportation practitioners, we can control how these technologies are implemented in our transportation system. But first, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, autonomous vehicles. When I worked on the 2018 transportation referendum, we heard from many residents and some anti-transit advocates that autonomous vehicles are going to solve all of our transportation problems. Well, right when that referendum was happening, Vanderbilt had a new engineering professor that was just starting, my colleague Dan Work, and I'm sure many of you have heard presentations from him. He is one of the national experts on autonomous vehicles, and Preston mentioned one of the projects that he is working on with TDOT on the I-24 corridor. A couple of other projects that he's working on include the ones on this screen, adaptive cruise control and phantom traffic jams. And I think one of the important things to note is he can, of course, explain these studies far better than I can. But the main conclusions are that at best, automated technologies can help dampen phantom traffic jams, but at worst, they often amplified speed disturbances and actually dramatically increase vehicle miles traveled and thus congestion. So they are not a panacea in any sense of the word. So how do we respond to these technologies as they are coming? And the reason I wanted to start from this perspective is because Vanderbilt has been thinking about these technologies and changes and trying to make very intentional decisions about how we move our campus forward. I borrowed these photos from NACTO's Blueprint for Autonomous Urbanism. And what I really love about their approach is that they advocate for focusing on a human-focused autonomous future. Again, we don't necessarily need autonomous vehicles. We don't need to let autonomous vehicles happen to us. We can really sort of guide how these technologies are implemented in these cities. And it really comes back to focusing on policies and street design that prioritize people and pedestrians and high-capacity multimodal movements. What I do love about this too is that the scene on the right is supposed to be an example of a street that prioritizes single occupancy vehicles. But let's be honest, in Nashville, we don't even have that quite yet. We have many corridors that don't have sidewalk infrastructure on them at all, let alone functioning intersections and crosswalks. So we have a ways to go even to get to those types of corridors, let alone the picture on the right, which really sort of prioritizes space for pedestrians and multimodal users. And you can see that the autonomous vehicles really only have access to one lane on this street. So while they will be there and of course will play a role in our future, it's up to us to decide what type of role they want to play. Okay, so moving into MoveView. As I said, we have been thinking very intentionally about these technologies and how we want them to play a role on our campus. Future View is our campus land use plan. This is something universities do pretty frequently, but I think for us, the Future View process has really taken on an outsized impact about the type of campus we want to be and the type of university that we want to be. And one thing to note, most of you probably know this, Vanderbilt is the largest private employer in all of Middle Tennessee. We have about 18,000 people on our campus every day and 12,000 people that are commuting to and from campus. Of course, those are pre-COVID data points. And combined with the medical center, we have about 55,000 trips generated from our campus. So we are the second highest generator to downtown in the Metro Nashville area. So Future View is really driving sort of the decision-making process that we're going through. One of the examples of that is our West End neighborhood. If you haven't had a chance to come walk through campus, I highly suggest that you do that. We are making conscious decisions to prioritize pedestrians, pedestrianized streets, burying utilities, expanding sidewalks, and really making more space for people rather than for cars, and particularly parked cars. Another big driver of our MoveView work is our sustainability goals. We hope to be carbon neutral by 2050, and our carbon footprint from commutes and from vehicles is about 25%. So that's a big guiding line for us, is how we reduce our emissions from vehicles. Our goals, as I mentioned, is to reduce our drive alone rate. So we're at about 76.5% of people who drive alone to campus every day. Again, these are all pre-COVID numbers. We are in the process of, we determined our mode share by a commute survey done in 2019. And we actually have a new commute survey that's out right now. And we hope to do one during each of our remaining reopening phases. And so that's going to become our new baseline once COVID is done. But for now, we're going to stick with the data that we do know. Our goal is to reduce our drive alone rate from 76.5% to 55% by 2025. And as I mentioned, being very, very intentional about prioritizing infrastructure for walking and biking so that we can ensure that at least 80% of trips across campus are happening by those modes. So what role does data play in our decisions? The first part of this piece is that we did an assessment of all of our faculty, staff, and graduate students, where they live on campus, where they live in the community, and what options they have available to them. So that really helped us create a data-driven process for determining what those mode share goals would be. Second, we've used a lot of data on campus, particularly data from our OFO bike pilot and from scooter activity to help us better understand how people are traveling across campus. We've had goals for quite a while to create a greenway system through campus, and we use the data from the OFO bike pilot to actually make some changes to that greenway pattern. We saw that there were a lot of people traveling from our main campus over to our Peabody campus, as well as from the main campus over to the athletics facilities. And so ensuring that we had high quality pedestrian infrastructure in those places. The chart on the right is, again, another project by my friends in the engineering department that helped us see where people were parking their scooters and is helping inform upgrades that we're making to bike and scooter parking infrastructure across campus. One of the other exciting projects that we have just launched this year is our commute hub and daily parking. As we are a TDM program, Transportation Demand Management, and as we look at peers across the country, we've seen that being able to change from an all-you-can-eat annual parking pass to a daily parking pass is one of the biggest drivers of behavior change when it comes to choosing your mode to and from work. And we launched our commute hub in February of this year, and we launched daily parking in 3 of our garages. So we have about 1,400 spaces dedicated to this program. And this actually ended up being a technology project. Our system is entirely integrated. You use your Vanderbilt ID card to access the garage, and it's integrated with the parking gates, integrated with our commute hub, and integrated with our payroll system. So it ended up being a 9-month technology project that I did not necessarily anticipate, but I think the users of the system really appreciate the seamlessness of that project. And we are, of course, studying how it's working so that we can adapt, as well as sort of better understanding the role that daily parking plays in decision making. The last 2 slides is about the point I made at the very beginning around applying data. I think one of the biggest issues that we have as transportation planners and traffic engineers is that we are making decisions based off of incomplete data. Traffic engineering and transportation planning allows for warrants for pedestrian safety, for allocating space to pedestrians, in putting in new crosswalks and new traffic signals, but you have to have the data that proves that there are enough pedestrians to warrant those changes. The problem is that we only count cars. When I was in the mayor's office, and I don't think this has changed too much, there were no permanent pedestrian counters anywhere in the city. So it's really hard to determine whether there are enough pedestrians to warrant these changes. So I am most excited about Vanderbilt's commitment to investing in data collection and sensor technology that will allow us to have a better complete picture of the data that's out there to really understand how people are moving. I feel very confident that Vanderbilt is probably the 2nd highest pedestrian trip generator outside of Lower Broadway. And as a result, streets like 21st Avenue and West End, which are just adjacent to campus, should better prioritize pedestrians and pedestrian safety. And these are just examples of where we are partnering with TDOT on the Blue Toad sensors, which are down there on the bottom left. And then we've invested in 3 array of things sensors and multi-directional cameras. And the picture up there on the right is actually, we are training the cameras to be able to identify cars, bikes, pedestrians, and scooters. And finally, this is just an example of some of the scooter data trip that we have collected on 21st Avenue, just showing the tremendous amount. I would have never thought that people would be riding a scooter on 21st Avenue. So to see that there are, 45,000 trips being made on scooters on 21st Avenue just really shows that that corridor is particularly ripe for, better amenities for walkers, bikers, and transit users. And scooterers, of course. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and thank you so much for having me here today, and look forward to a really interesting discussion. And I'll turn it back over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Erin. That was really great information. Very exciting and forward-thinking work that Vanderbilt is doing. I especially appreciate the technological application of big data and the way you're analyzing that to make Vanderbilt a more mobile and accessible campus. That's really exciting work. Our next panelist is Jorge Riveros. And Jorge is currently employed by the Metropolitan Nashville Public Works Department, and he is the Assistant Director, Chief Engineer. Jorge has previously worked in Arizona, Colorado, and Texas, and he has over 20 years of diverse engineering and administrative experience, multimodal transportation engineering and planning, and intelligent transportation systems, public works, maintenance, and emerging transportation technology. He has served on various national, state, and local committees, boards, and professional organizations, presented and moderated on numerous topics at conferences around the country, and he has a successful track record of working collaboratively with national, state, and local partners, public officials, stakeholders, citizens, and other public groups. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering and Engineering Mechanics from the University of Arizona. He's a licensed professional engineer in Colorado, Arizona, Texas, and Tennessee. He's a certified professional traffic operations engineer, as well as a certified traffic signal operations specialist. So Jorge, welcome.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. And thank you to the panel and everybody out there who's listening today. I'm going to just start by saying I'm not as smart as everybody on here. I don't have any slides to share, so mine is the least smart of the smart technology presentations. But I do want to thank everybody, especially Bob. I'm the new kid on the block. I've been here in Tennessee about 5 months now, and just had recently come from Texas. So I was very pleased to be asked to speak today, and with such a esteemed panel. These are some great people you've got on here, some of whom I've met and have started to work with. So I'm very excited. Just to tell you a little bit about my background, then we'll get into what we're trying to do here in Nashville. Most recently, I was in Austin, Texas. I worked in the Smart Mobility office. I was the program manager for Smart Mobility. What we acted in doing was really bringing emerging technology to Texas. Texas has really understood the benefits of progress in transportation safety and technology. And as a result, many of the communities around Texas have worked together collaboratively under the umbrella of the Texas Innovation Alliance to bring this technology that hopefully will help with our transportation woes around the country. So I'm not just specifically looking at Texas, but it's something that Erin spoke to a little bit in terms of, how do we approach safety? How do we approach congestion management? And so as a result of that, I was working quite directly in connected and automated vehicle technology. We were the first municipal agency in Texas to deliver dedicated short-range communication technology. We were also the first municipal agency to bring cellular vehicle to everything technology and test a host of different technologies, different manufacturers, interoperability, cybersecurity around connected and automated vehicles. We also looked at Vision Zero programs, looking at intersection safety analysis and analytics using big data, some of the stuff Erin had talked about, and some of the things that Preston had just recently mentioned. So those are some of the things that I've worked on in the past, in the last couple of years. So I was very excited to come here and see that Tennessee is moving in the correct direction, in the right direction, doing these technology deployments, having the people here that are interested and focused on learning about how they can bring safety and congestion management tools to Middle Tennessee. Specifically, we've talked to people at Vanderbilt and Erin's team, really great work that they're doing. Very excited to see what TDOT was doing when I first came here. So it was a very nice transition into what was happening in Tennessee. especially when we're looking at all the technology that's going on today. One of the things that I recognize in terms of where Nashville stands, and interestingly enough, for the size of city that it is, the largest city that it is in Tennessee, the unfortunate part is it doesn't have the level of technology enhancement and advancement that it should. That was something I recognized as soon as I came here. We're working with a lot of obsolete and outdated technology, but I'm excited again about the opportunities that we do have working with our partners like TDOT and Vanderbilt. I think that we're headed in the right direction. We've made a couple of strides. We're currently working on a number of different projects. Preston had mentioned it. Aaron had mentioned it. We're working with TDOT and looking at the smart corridors studies that they're working on, deploying Blue Toad DSRC, the dedicated short-range communication devices that I spoke about. So that's an exciting project that we're working on. That'll be data collection, understanding what's happening on our roadways, connected automated vehicle technologies for the future. We're also working with Cord right now. We were lucky enough to get a grant with Cord, working on smart loading and unloading zones, understanding that technology. We understand our curb space is very valuable. The way we manage it, the way that people use it today, with the influx of TNCs, the transportation network companies that are operating out there like Uber and Lyft and others, have kind of crowded our spaces, and you couple that with everything that happens in some of these thriving downtowns and communities with loading and unloading. This is going to help us understand, how do we best manage our curb space? How do we manage who's coming in, when they're coming in, how they reserve space. So we're very excited about this work that we're starting with Cord. We're in talks right now. We're in the planning stages, so we're excited about a possible launch in the spring of 2021, and I think it'll be very exciting for us in terms of what we're doing. Obviously, the pandemic has created a lot of uncertainty about how we manage these things. So Aaron and Preston both talked about data, as I said earlier. We're trying to understand what kind of data do we collect around this. So that's one of the challenges as well. We've just submitted for the ATCMTD grant, the Alphabet Soup grant, as we like to call it, or the Advanced Transportation Congestion Management and Technologies Deployment grant. We're working on doing something around connected vehicle, but with our local transit agency, WeGo. And so we're looking at how we collect information about headway. And so that's a really exciting project that we work in collaboration with TDOT to try to see what we can bring into Nashville. So those are three of the exciting projects that we're working on right now. Based on my experience, I think there's a lot of opportunity, as I said. I'm hoping that there's companies that see the value in coming to Tennessee. Again, when I look back at what I did in Texas, it was kind of that whole sort of collaborative space in what Preston talked about earlier. We were looking at actually, we did deployments with electric vehicles that were connected, and then looking at how they operated in the system. So I think that's one of the opportunities that we have here. And when we talk about smart cities or smart technology, I think there's some of the things that Aaron mentioned as well when we talk about not only being vehicle dependent, but also when we look at our other mobility customers, so our transit users, our bicyclists, our pedestrians. And so we want to kind of create the technology around there that in some cases nobody really sees as smart, but I think when I talk about smart mobility or smart technology, I always say it starts from the foundational things, just having the right transportation infrastructure in place. And that means good bike networks. It means good sidewalks. And one of the things I'm very excited about right now is the opportunity that we're bringing currently. And I think we may be doing our first Hawk deployment in Nashville. And I think that's going to be a real winning element to how we contribute to the safety of pedestrians in our environment. And so I'm excited about that. Some people might not see that as a smart technology in terms of what we're doing with connected automated vehicle, but I surely do. I think it's one of the more exciting things that we're bringing to Nashville. On top of that, I've been challenging, my role here is oversight of a lot of different sections in engineering. I've been challenging some of my groups to take a look at the technology that we can use. So in terms of land development, I'm asking them to take a look at smart land use. I'm asking them to take a look at curb management, curb electrification, the use of shared space for scooters and other devices. So these are kind of the things that we're talking about. Like I said, unfortunately, we don't have the current infrastructure to support a lot of it, but I'm very excited about the future. I think there's a lot of momentum here. I'm just glad to be working alongside great institutions like Vanderbilt and TDOT to kind of deliver those services. They've been very instrumental in helping us along the way. And I think that Nashville is going to be able to grow out of this. Another piece of that, though, that we're trying to understand is the policy side. We have the unfortunate condition that we're restricted by some of the legislation that exists here in Nashville. So we're taking a look at that because we want to be able to deploy these technologies in order to collect the right data, in order to understand what are the trends here and how do we combat some of the things. As Aaron said, our pedestrian fatalities are trending in the wrong direction. Instead of looking at some of these treatments to make them go down, looking at Vision Zero, which is one of the things that we are working on right now as well. We want to make sure that we're using the right technology and talk to the right people and using that and learning from it so that we can bring the right technologies. I think that's one of the important things to talk about is what technologies to use and how to use them. I think a lot of times we look at shiny objects. There's a lot of people out there selling a lot of things. But we have to be able to understand how to best use these technologies, how it's unique to our environment, and understand and help people in the industry understand what we're trying to achieve. So we've got to define our own goals. I think that's part of what I'm tasking my staff to do is let's think about bigger, broader goals, bigger, broader policy, and how technology can come help us. It can be a supplement to what we're trying to do from the human side, because we always have to take that into consideration. We're talking about, equity and accessibility from the standpoint of that technology. And so I think that in itself is one of the things that's most important. We want to bring that human element back in, like Aaron spoke about, and make sure that we make the right movements towards the right goals here in Nashville. It was great to hear both Preston and Aaron before me. I think, they covered a lot of really great information. Again, they've been great collaborators. I'm excited about our future. And I'm excited to hear the rest of our speakers. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Bob.
Thank you, Jorge. We're so glad that you've brought your expertise to the Nashville region. And I certainly look forward to your help in enhancing our technological capabilities. Our next panelist is Adam Mosier. And Adam has been working in traffic engineering and intelligent transportation systems, or ITS, for over 20 years in both the public and private sectors. He's worked on several advanced signal and ITS projects in the areas of systems engineering, design, construction, and integration of ITS devices, traffic signals, and software. Over the years, he has specialized in adaptive signal control technologies, including operation and maintenance of these advanced traffic control systems. Currently, Adam is the City of Franklin's traffic engineer, working on various traffic signal technology projects amidst everyday traffic engineering duties. Adam graduated from Michigan State University with a BS in civil engineering. He has 3 children, 2 teenage daughters, and an 8-year-old son. Adam, why don't you take it now, and we'll wrap up our introductory comments.
Thanks, Bob. I'm happy to be here. One thing, I guess, graduating from Michigan State, we finally get football this weekend. I've waited a long time for it, so thanks for the introduction. Going going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So again, thank you for inviting me here. My administration would be remiss if I didn't brag a little bit about Franklin. We've won a few awards this year. One of the most proudest being the 8th best place to live in the U.S. by Money Magazine, as well as our community engagement. One of the things Franklin does is we survey our citizens and we listen to them, and we really take what they have to say to heart. As everyone knows, we're kind of a byproduct of the growth of Nashville. As Nashville grows, so does Franklin. We're obviously a suburb, but every time, our big city grows, the suburbs grow as well. So over the last 10 years, we've had a huge increase in jobs and population. Families come to Williamson County. We're known for our school system. So, a lot of them end up being here and commuting to Nashville. But one of our biggest things, challenges, I guess you could say, is that we are growing too fast for a lot of our citizens that have been here a while. So, in our survey, growth, affordable housing, and transportation are the top 3 items that concern citizens for Franklin. So with that, everything's not always peachy. As being the traffic engineer, I came in almost 2 years ago, replaced Carl Boffman. He did a fantastic job. But it's funny when you read or get sent social media posts. As a traffic engineer, you might get raked over the coals a little bit. But I truthfully, I have an easy time balancing red lights. It's the green ones that I have problems with sometimes, right? So, and I obviously can't mow the median, so I guess that's something that I'll take into account in the future. So, when we looked at this survey, we sat down and said, what do our citizens want? What are their expectations? We are a family-oriented community, so transit ridership is very low. There are lots of children, schedules to be kept, and our citizens know that sometimes transit, biking, etc., is not the best way to commute and to get around Franklin and Williamson County. So ours is pretty vehicle-centric, which hopefully will change in the future. So just real quick, our existing system in the field is pretty mature for a local agency. We do have, almost 120 traffic signals. They almost all are connected. We have probably about 97% connection rate for all of our traffic signals, and it's mostly fiber optic cable. We have older legacy controllers, but we are testing our advanced transportation controllers, or ATC. We're also testing other manufacturers' ATCs as well, just to try to help us solve some of our transportation issues. We do have cameras in Franklin. They continue to grow our camera network. Our detection was traditionally loops. We've gone to microwave radar. We also have MyoVision recently with a 360, kind of the fisheye camera we'll talk about a little bit later. Again, we have fiber optics. We have GPS preemption devices for all our first responder vehicles. We do deploy flashing yellow arrows. I'm sure if you've been in and around Franklin, you know where those are. And our signal cabinets, we are upgrading from the old, being a little technical for you, but we're going from the NEMA TS1 to the NEMA TS2. So that's the newer cabinet that the TDOT is specified that we go with from here on out. So we do have a traffic operations center in City Hall. We employ an operator, a specialist, kind of our tech guy. We have two traffic engineers. We're blessed with that, one being me. We have a video wall to show our cameras, look at our maps, see how the signal system's doing. 3 of these workstations in the TOC, we call it the TOC. And then, of course, we have software that we have to manage and monitor throughout the day. And then to disseminate our incidents, we, like TDOT, we do not have dynamic message signs or boards over the freeway. Instead, we use various forms of social media and third-party devices such as Waze. We're part of this Connected Cities program, and email blasts, things like that. So let's talk about our initiatives. Our biggest one that's under construction right now is the adaptive signal system. This is something that I've been involved in adaptive signal systems for over 15 years before people even knew what they were, working in Florida. Basically, you know, adaptive signal system measures real-time traffic and adjusts the signals accordingly. So does that always work seamlessly? No. Over the years, I've learned that even computers have problems trying to figure out how much traffic is there, let alone engineers. So it works better for unpredictable traffic, such as our mall area, which can be very unpredictable, especially in the holidays. Otherwise, well, most people say it's just busy. But there are some components that we're putting in there, upgrading our controllers, adding detection. All that is going on right now. We hope to turn that on this spring. Our Murfreesboro Road corridor is our busiest corridor. It's our, you hate to say it's a gateway because it's ugly, but it's our gateway from 65 to downtown Franklin. Typical 5-section geometry. But what we're doing with this is we're trying to use technology to improve the flow of that corridor. Like I said, it's the shortest distance between 65 and downtown Franklin. It's always congested for the most part, and we're trying to solve that using technology. So in addition to upgrading for our ADA, our sidewalk ramps and buttons and whatnot, we're going to be putting out there some connected vehicle components, automated traffic signal performance measures, which will, it's not like adaptive, it actually kind of puts the engineer in the loop to analyze the data and then deploy solutions and fixes. And we hope to have that constructed next summer. So as you can see, the two technology projects are going to kind of fall on the heels of each other, back to back. Our technology initiatives for connected vehicle, Franklin, we were aware of the I-24 project, and we're definitely keeping a track of that. We definitely want to hear the lessons learned on that. But what I've been involved in Florida and going forward is, you know, it's not really practical right now, at least right now, for vehicles to be equipped with an onboard unit that's like a separate unit. It's not your traditional screen that you see in most cars. Those aren't ready for connected vehicles, but at least they are throwing out messages right now. Many cars are throwing out safety messages, basic safety messages, or BSMs. And so we can collect those. And we see that the DSRC is not really feasible when you're asking somebody to buy a $2,000 piece of equipment or asking a manufacturer to put this into the vehicles that are really not standardized yet. It's not real practical in the short term. I think our short term or near term, whatever you want to call it, is, you know, devices that we all have. So whether it's a subscription service, whether we look at like a proprietary type service for connected vehicles, you know, or an app that you can maybe run on your phone or whatnot. That's kind of what I see in the future here that we're looking at. And that's kind of what we're doing on the State Route 96 corridors. We're putting the radios in, and we're going to leave it open for now instead of requesting OBUs. Other third-party initiatives, we are, like I said, part of the Connected City program with Waze. This gives us a lot of interesting tools for free. Travel times, as you see, if I can, right here, it says this is 4 minutes, 16 miles an hour is this segment from Mallory Lane from Baker's Bridge to Fraser. It's usually 3 minutes at 21 miles an hour. So it says, okay, there's moderate traffic. So that's kind of a useful tool in real time that tells us a corridor is heavier than usual or not. Waze supplies that data for free. They don't do historic, but they do supply it. So you could actually build an app to collect that data and for historic purposes and look back. Other third-party things we have going on, Amazon is testing their Scout in a couple of neighborhoods. It's the autonomous package delivery system. It's about the size of a igloo cooler, weighs about 105 pounds. And of course, it can't deliver huge packages, but it can do about 3 or 4 different packages. And they're testing it in a few local neighborhoods in Franklin. But we do want to be tech friendly to our third-party people. So just a few, trying to wrap up here real quick. So I think the question part is really important, the forum piece of this. We are deploying other technologies, detection units, whether it's Bluetooth. This particular unit we have as a service. We buy the service and not the product, but the product comes with it. The nice thing about that is if they upgrade it, they'll swap it out. We don't have to buy another product. Again, it's kind of like what's incorporated in downtown Nashville, around Nashville with Blue Toad. It's very similar, gives you similar criteria and or data. What we really are trying to focus on with our detection devices moving forward, and this is why I went to MyVision SmartView 360, is we want to collect data. Our old detectors just on, off, and sometimes they would work, sometimes they wouldn't work. It wasn't really conducive to collect counts. So now we're going to technology, whether it's Wavetronics or these 360 cameras that can collect traffic data, whether it's pedestrian and bike, which works okay. We did some testing, some analyzing on pedestrian and bike counts. The MyVision's pretty close. I wouldn't call it exact, but it's pretty close. Just a quick example of what that looks like. It's got artificial intelligence. It can tell between a light vehicle and a heavy vehicle, the HV and LVs, as well as if you had a bike here and a pedestrian, it would be able to tell you that. But it gives you really great data. And this is the piece that we love about it, is I can take this to one of our aldermen. They can understand it, at this intersection, how many vehicles went through the intersection, what movements are heaviest movements, AM and PM peaks, bicycles and pedestrians, et cetera. So we are using that data on our test beds. We only have a few of these cameras, but we plan to expand them. And really our goal is to take all this tech and test it and really get it into our standards. We're doing various studies, Cool Spring Transportation Study. They kind of go hand in hand. So as the tech, as we get comfortable with the tech, see its benefits, write it into our street standards and go forward with that. So with that, Bob, I'm going to throw it back to you for questions.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. That's really great stuff. It's clear Franklin is really on the forefront of some of these technological advances. So great. And thanks again to all our panelists for your introductory comments. Now we're going to begin the discussion stage of this forum. And if you in the audience have questions, please enter them and we'll try to get them answered by our panel. I'm going to start off the questions first. And for my first question, I'd like to hear briefly from each of the panelists on this question. And we'll start off with Preston and then just go in the order that we have. But Preston, just to start off and then follow up with the other panelists, what are the greatest challenges your organization faces in implementing technology strategies?
Thank you. I think Adam may have said it or Jorge, one of the two, about the number of vendors and shininess of different applications. I think what is going to be important is trying to deduct down to those applications that provide us the most useful information and help answer questions, kind of some of the things that Aaron mentioned about, making sure that we're thinking about all modes of transportation and making sure that the technologies are capable of collecting and tracking the kind of movements that best inform our ultimate decisions, whether it be policy-based or infrastructure-based. So I think it's really the culmination of taking all of this data, which is a lot, and deducting it down that can inform the policy decisions that we need to make. these things are not in isolation, as you know. I mean, we spent a lot of time today talking about a lot of the roadway side of things, but the influence of the environment, such as the land use provisions and the different components that inform our opportunities to make different transportation choices. So I just think that the vastness of data and then being able to deduct that down so that it can inform our decision-making process.
Thanks. Aaron?
One of the things that we've been thinking about recently that is particularly challenging is the sort of trade-off between privacy concerns and better data and technology. And I can't see who is attending right now, so I don't know if there's any Metro Council members. So I guess I have to put that disclaimer. These are my views, not that of my employer. But there is definitely a tendency in Metro Council right now to limit our ability to use technology because of a privacy concern. And while that is absolutely important and needs to be addressed, I think the natural inclination is to not use the technology at all, rather than trying to address the privacy concern and still enable the technology. I think one theme that we heard across all the speakers is that, frankly, Nashville is behind when it comes to being able to use technology to better transportation system. So any efforts to outright limit a technology to better inform our transportation planning is really damaging to our transportation system and puts us even further behind our peers.
Jorge?
Well, I think there's three things that we can point to. Financing is one. We're in a position right now where financially we may not be able to do the type of technology deployments that we've done that we're excited to try. That was one of the exciting things about my time in Austin, is that Smart Mobility program was a revenue neutral program. So it was really built on public-private partnerships. And I think that's something that we really need to look at if those financial considerations are really going to be a challenge. Aaron just said it. It's the PPI. It's the personal privacy, information, and understanding how we use, how we separate, how we anonymize that data, and that speaks to the legislation. And Aaron spoke about that as well. There's a very restrictive sort of policy in here in Nashville in terms of what we can do with what is deemed surveillance data. Those of us who've worked in transportation and traffic for a long time understand that many of these technologies are operational in nature. And that's, I think, the part that, we have to help educate not only our council members, but the public to know what we're using the data for. And I think that's where our openness in how it's used, bringing the real experts in to kind of calm the waters a bit about what this technology can do is vital. So I think there's again, the privacy considerations, there's financial, and there's legislative considerations.
Okay. Adam, your thoughts?
So I would have to say that the technology is still young. It is, there's lots of neat little toys out there. There's very few that have been proven, and to take the first step off the ledge is very difficult. When you're looking at, different vendors, I think being last, I can pretty much say all the above. Preston, Aaron, and Jorge basically laid it all out. But I think with me, it's in the city of Franklin, it's what can we use that's smart, that is tested, standards-based. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into a proprietary solution. So we have to be careful with that and be stuck with something. So basically using our devices that we have to collect data and make the best use of that data. That's our challenge that we have today.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and I'm going to start with Jorge on this question, and then if any other panelists want to add, they can after Jorge. But Jorge, what do you see as the most significant technology-related change, and I'd say maybe kind of a game changer in transportation, that we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years, so relatively short term.
I think the advent of artificial intelligence in the way we do data collection. Now, some people would say, well, automated vehicles, certainly. But the truth is automated vehicles already are out there. They're already operating. I mean, in Austin, we had Ford and Argo already mapping and testing. And so if you think about it that way, those technologies exist. And the only issue there is, have they been tested in a real live environment? And that's what's happening now. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's the advent of AI and how we use that technology in our data collection. I mean, I think those of us who've been in the industry, anywhere over 20 years and have seen how rapidly transportation has changed in maybe the last decade. Prior to that, we still did everything by hand. We did our studies. It was based on the 4-step planning process in a lot of cases, and a lot of traffic engineering, foundational stuff that we learned in school. But technology has really changed rapidly, and it's being implemented in what we do in transportation. So I think that the AI component that we've seen rising is going to be a very big new technological advancement that will help us with our data collection and also help us understand how to collect the data correctly. How do we create our algorithms, and what are the questions that we're trying to have answered? What are the issues we're trying to solve? That becomes incumbent upon us as practitioners who represent our agencies to know what the issues are, and not, again, just say, wow, there's all this great technology, give us everything, because we can't handle that level of information. We've got to set the parameters, we've got to define the issues, and then we've got to use that technology and that artificial intelligence data to help solve the issues that we're looking to do. Some are global, some are going to be more unique to the environments in which we all live. So I think that's one of the big things that I think will change quite a bit of how we look at technology in the next coming years.
Okay, great. Aaron, now you had talked about the privacy issue. One question is, with so much great data being collected, are there agreements in place to share across organizations?
Yeah, I think that there are, and a number of the projects that we talked about, that each of the speakers talked about, are examples of that. The I-24 corridor is probably the best example of a partnership between Metro Nashville, TDOT, and Vanderbilt, as well as the Blue Toad initiative. I think what's really exciting about Blue Toads, and the Blue Toads are actually devices that pick up the Bluetooth in your tires or in your phone and can help tell the travel time between the two devices. Of course, all aggregated and anonymized as well. But as Metro, TDOT, and Vanderbilt make individual investments into the Blue Toad infrastructure, all of that data becomes publicly accessible, and anybody who has even just one Blue Toad in the system can access that data. So I think that that's a hugely important part. All of us have finite resources, and I think that we have to sort of talk about how finite resources really impact our ability to do transportation planning, and thus should be sort of sharing resources and data as much as possible.
Very good, thank you. Adam, I'm going to turn to you for this question. You had mentioned just how car-centric Franklin is. And one of the questions from the audience was, are you doing anything to consider opportunities to add bike paths and increase pedestrian opportunities? I would expand that too, to say maybe trying to optimize the use of shared mobility, possibly in that. Are there any, I guess, promising technological ways to make progress in those areas?
Yeah, I think most of our paths right now, our multi-use paths, are recreational in use. We do have a State Route 96 multi-use path that's getting connected to downtown Franklin from West Haven. We got we have many, many miles of pathway. The new Mack Hatcher's getting a multi-use path. I guess our challenge is that it's being used for recreation and not really transportation, right? So that's where I see our challenge is how do we get the mindset of our workforce in and around Franklin that lives in Franklin to actually use different modes other than a car. And, you know, if we put the paths out there, could you imagine building an interstate for 20 cars? No, you wouldn't do that. So, that is our biggest challenge. We put in the infrastructure out there, and now we really have to figure out how do we get people to move from their vehicle to bike to work, whether it's a few miles, walk to work. Give them the infrastructure, and we'll go there. I think with technology, you know, it's almost a two-edged sword. If we make the vehicle easy to use via technology and resources and apps, they'll be hard to switch to bike and ped and micro-mobility modes. In Franklin, we do not allow electric scooters, but that's just, for short term, I think, for long term, we might have to look at some micro-mobility options to try to get people out of their cars. But it's kind of a two-edged sword. Like I say, you get all kinds of technology, know which routes to use, get around traffic. No one's going to want to use transit, bike, ped. So, it's a fine line to walk.
Yeah, no perfect answer there. Preston, let me ask you this question raised by the audience. We've touched on transit during this conversation. What do you see kind of the long-term outlook for transit in the region? And we're recognizing that, it may not be talking in the next 5 years, but further out, even
Right.
the next 20 years or whatever.
Yeah, great. Yeah, very, very good question. And I think Jorge kind of mentioned a little bit about the partnership. We were hopeful that they received the grant. It's a competitive one, but one is on Charlotte Avenue. And I guess it would be probably touted as a smart corridor, looking at opportunities to integrate and expand the technological aspects of transit along that corridor. I think, as you know, and probably the viewers as well, is as part of the IMPROVE Act, the department began to set aside capital funds for transit agencies statewide. And so annually, we make state dollars available. These are over and beyond federal funds that they have access to make capital investments in their transit system. And we're beginning to see more and more transit agencies more interested in technological aspects of transit. So I think that you'll continue to see that. For Middle Tennessee, I think the reality is that in most cases, our corridors, specifically on the interstate, are built out, and we are going to have to better manage those facilities. And so I think a better management component will include the integration of transit within the managed lane or managed aspect of the roadway. I think that it's just the reality that transportation is not one mode, and that we'll have to work towards maximizing all modes to provide those mobility choices, and also to provide accessibility for those. We talked a little bit about on the auto side, and maybe listening here, one aspect I think on technology is that for those that may be mobility challenged, have a disability or whatnot, these innovations are wonderful because they provide an opportunity for a larger portion of our society to have mobility choices that we have freely. So that is a definite advantage. And I think we'll see more of that as we move forward.
Great, thanks. Aaron, you mentioned the problem we're having with pedestrian safety. So a question would be, how can we use technology to improve safety for vehicles, but I think especially pedestrians and bicyclists?
Yeah, I thank you so much, Bob, for that question. First, I have to talk a little bit about infrastructure, which isn't necessarily a technology question, but in Nashville, and I'm sure Franklin's in the same boat. You know, we built neighborhoods for decades without sidewalks, and that means that we only have a third of the sidewalks that we actually need. A deficit that would cost us $10 billion to actually fix and actually build sidewalks in all the places that we need them. So when I think about how we can use data to improve safety, there's sort of two things. One is being able to use data to better prioritize where those infrastructure investments should be. We know that there are lots of neighborhoods that have been sort of systematically underinvested in. And so creating sort of an equity screening tool, which really is at its core, being able to use big data to identify where your investment should be prioritized, I think is critical for us to start thinking about how to rectify those challenges. And secondly, we need to have a sort of common ground when we're talking about safety. I'm studying traffic engineering. I'm an urban planner by training, but I'm studying traffic engineering now. And one of the things that worries me most is that when we in traffic engineering, when we identify a potential conflict between a pedestrian and a vehicle, our tendency is to take the pedestrian out of the equation. What that has done across Middle Tennessee is it's created this two-tiered transportation system where you take access away from the pedestrian or the biker or the scooterer. And that can't be our solution. We have to figure out how to create sort of multimodal solutions to these intersections. And right now we're seeing that the people that walk the most are most in danger. But when you actually build a multimodal transportation system that has better access and facilities for walker, bikers, and transit, your traffic deaths start to go down. And so that's the direction that we need to be moving in.
Thanks. Great insights, Erin. And, we're running up against our time constraint here. I wish we had more time where we could continue the conversation because there's more questions that we'd like to ask. I think one in particular that, I'm not going to ask just due to the time is how do we pay for all this, right? I mean, that's going to be a great challenge, but it's also very important for us to figure out exactly that answer. And I think with Nashville's current transportation plan and the work TDOT's doing, we're gonna get some identification of that of those kind of answers. But anyway, to wrap up, thank you very much. I think this has been an incredible panel, a lot of great information. And thanks to all the audience for tuning in and we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.